What do when the world tells you you're nothing, but your heart whispers, "You're a champion"? It was 1954 in Louisville, Kentucky, a city split in two by skin color and silence. Streets where black children were told how far they could dream, how fast they could run, how loud they could speak. But what happens when a boy refuses to stay in his lane? His name was Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., a name America didn't expect to remember. But how does a stolen bicycle turn a child into a warrior? It was raining that day, the kind of rain that soaks into your soul. Cassius had left his bike outside the Columbia Auditorium while he went inside for some free popcorn. When he came out, it was gone. Vanished. Like it had never been there. A police officer named Joe Martin was working in a nearby boxing gym when Cassius, wild with anger, ran up to him. "I want to whoop whoever took my bike!" The officer looked at him and smiled. "You better learn how to fight first." But what if that officer hadn't been there? What if the bike hadn't been stolen? Would the world have ever known Muhammad Ali? That was the moment everything changed. He stepped into the gym and never stepped out the same. From the very first punch, something ignited inside him. A fire, a rage, a purpose. Why did he train like a madman when other boys were just trying to survive? Because Cassius wasn't born to survive. He was born to shock the world. At just 12, he began training 6 days a week. Fast hands, faster mouth. They said he talked too much. He said he talked because he could back it up. "If you even dream of beating me, you better wake up and apologize." But what makes a boy believe he's destined for greatness when the world tells him he's not even equal? At school, he was mocked. On buses, pushed aside. But in the gym, he was royalty. Every jab, every dodge, every breath was a step toward becoming the man he already believed he was. Was he born with it? Or did pain build him into it? One day, he stood in front of a mirror, fists up, eyes sharp, and whispered to himself, "I am the greatest. Not I want to be, not I hope to be, but I am." He hadn't won anything yet, but in his mind, he had already beaten everyone. That belief? That was scarier than any punch. But who teaches a boy to dream like that, when the world is built to keep him small? The answer? No one. He taught himself, through fire, through sweat, through silence. Years later, they'd call him arrogant, loud, cocky. But what they didn't know was that every word was armor, every rhyme a shield, every shout a scream against a world that refused to listen. How do you silence a man who was born to be heard? You can't. Because when Cassius Clay threw his first punch, Muhammad Ali was born. And the world? It would never be the same. What happens when the world tries to strip you of your name, your faith, your future, but you still refuse to kneel? By 1964, Cassius Clay was not just a name. It was a storm. He had shocked the world by defeating Sonny Liston, a man feared like a monster. The media had mocked Clay for his mouth, his confidence, his rhymes. But what if it wasn't arrogance? What if it was destiny disguised as defiance? After the fight, the world waited for his next move. And he dropped a bomb. He announced his conversion to Islam and took a new name, Muhammad Ali. But why would a rising star throw his fame into fire by changing everything the country wanted him to be? Because Ali wasn't playing by their rules. He was writing his own. America didn't like that. Suddenly, the same headlines that once praised him turned vicious. Unpatriotic. Un-American. Traitor. But Ali never flinched. "Cassius Clay is my slave name," he said. "I didn't choose it. I am Muhammad Ali." But what happens when speaking your truth costs you your crown? In 1967, the U.S. government drafted him for the Vietnam War. Ali stood in front of reporters and the world and said the unthinkable. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." The room froze. Reporters stared. America boiled. And Ali stood tall. Would you risk everything? your title, your money, your freedom, for something you believe in? He did. They stripped him of his heavyweight title, banned him from boxing, sentenced him to 5 years in prison. Though he never served time, the stain remained. For 3 prime years he was forbidden from doing what he was born to do: fight. But the real battle was already happening, not in the ring, but in the courts, in the press, in the public's mind. He went from being America's champion to its enemy. How does a man carry the weight of the world when the world no longer wants to carry him? He gave speeches across colleges, raised his voice louder than ever, and reminded the people, "I am not just a boxer, I stand for something." And slowly, hearts began to change. The same voices that once shouted against him started listening. His conviction, unshaken, his message, too powerful to ignore. What if losing everything is what makes you unstoppable? He returned to the ring in 1970, older, slower, but wiser. And the crowds, they roared like never before. Because by then the world realized Muhammad Ali wasn't fighting just opponents, he was fighting the system. The ring was his battlefield, but justice was his war. Who wins? The man with the belt, or the man who never bowed? Ali showed us it was never about titles. It was always about truth. And truth can't be defeated. What if the world says you're done, but your soul still whispers, "Not yet"? It was 1974, and the boxing world had moved on. They said Muhammad Ali was too old, too slow, too broken to ever be king again. But what happens when a man refuses to accept his own expiration date? The world laughed when he signed up to fight George Foreman, a 25-year-old undefeated powerhouse who knocked men out like thunder. Ali was 32, and the odds were 7-1 against him. The fight was set in Zaire, Africa, and they called it the Rumble in the Jungle. But why would a fading legend step into a ring where he could be destroyed? Because Ali wasn't just chasing a belt, he was chasing immortality. As the bell rang, the crowd chanted, "Ali Bomai! Ali, kill him!" But Ali did something no one expected. He leaned against the ropes and let Foreman punch, round after round. Why would anyone just stand there and take hits from the hardest puncher alive? It wasn't madness. It was strategy. Ali called it rope-a-dope. He let Foreman exhaust himself, punch after punch. Sweat flew, fists rained, but Ali stayed calm, calculating. And then, in round 8, when the world thought he was finished, he struck like lightning, a combination out of nowhere. Boom! Foreman hit the canvas. Ali stood tall, crowned once again. But how do you defeat a man who has already conquered fear, pain, and doubt? You don't. Because Ali didn't just win a fight, he won back history. But the battles weren't over. Outside the ring, age crept in. His speech slowed. His hands trembled. Parkinson's disease began stealing what boxing couldn't. What happens when your body fails, but your spirit still burns like fire? Ali stayed visible, not for sympathy, but for strength. He lit the Olympic torch in 1996, his hands shaking, the flame flickering, and the whole world wept. Not because he looked weak, but because he never stopped being strong. Who carries the weight of 1 billion hearts with shaking hands and a silent voice? Ali did. Because his greatness was never in how hard he hit. It was in how much he endured. He spoke less but stood more. He smiled, even when it hurt. Until the very end, he served. For children, for justice, for peace. He didn't just box, he inspired. So what makes a man the greatest? The knockouts, the medals, or the millions he moved without saying a word? Ali showed us it was never about being undefeated. It was about never backing down. Not from war, not from disease, not from truth. When he passed in 2016, the world paused because a king had left his throne. But his voice still echoes. His fire still burns, his legacy untouchable. Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. And Ali? He paid in full. He fought with his fists, but won with his heart. He lost everything, and still stood tall. They mocked his name. He turned it into legend. This wasn't just a boxing story. This was the fight for identity, truth, and legacy. So now the question is, will you carry the flame? Will you share his voice, his pain, his fire? If this story moved something inside you, then don't just watch, honor it, like, repeat, subscribe, because the world may forget titles, but it never forgets legends. This was the story of Muhammad Ali, and legends never die.